I remember in an editorial meeting, the first time I heard somebody say, 2.7% of people are intersex, as many as have red hair. Yeah. But that's just one of those talking point things. And I was completely boggled. I was like, what? Like, I've literally never met somebody who can't be categorised as male or female. Yeah. So what's your point? And now I know where that figure comes from. I know what the misrepresentation is. I know how to rebut it in a short form.
Well, let's start there.
All right. Okay. So if you include people who have polycystic ovaries or a particular, what can be very small deformity of the genitals when they're born, which is that the opening to the penis isn't quite on the end, it could be along the side somewhere, then you can get to 2.7% if you try really hard for people who have some sort of, kind of difference of sex development or disorder of sex development. Within that, about 1,000 of those people have something that you could seriously say this person has elements of the development of both sexes. But even then, that doesn't mean there's a third sex. It doesn't mean that those people are really intersex. Is what it sounds like, is that they're between the sexes. They're one sex or the other, but there's something that happened that pushed their body to try to develop down the other pathway. And, these are very serious disorders, actually, those ones. They can be fatal. They can cause infertility or sterility, really. And they often need you to have diagnosis early in life so that you can have treatment. They can have odd impacts like very low blood salt that's dangerous, and you wouldn't think that had something to do with a disorder of sex development. Now I know that. And anyway, this 2.7% of people have red hair. Where? It's loads more than that in Ireland, and it's pretty much none in Somalia. So like what? What's your point? It's just somebody came up with that as a talking point and it spread. And it's got like the hockey stick in, anti-climate change rhetoric. It's got that status. And there's about a dozen of those or maybe 20 of those. And they really derail you until you know where they come from and how to rebut them. So I feel like I'm on the side of the person who's doing the scientific thing, whereas the people who are arguing that sex is a spectrum or that, trans women are women, full stop, no debate, like really wholly and completely women, the same as every other woman. Like they're kind of the equivalent of the anti-vax or COVID conspiracist or whatever. They're the ones who are stitching together bizarre and shifting.
Well, if proof of that is when I spoke to Richard Dawkins and he spoke about this and he said it's lunacy and whatever. And the amount of comments, angry comments saying, oh, what a shame that Dawkins has gone this way. I wish he knew what I knew, that kind of thing. And it's like, but you're like, Cheeky Monkey 69, and he's the world's most famous evolutionary biologist, right? Yeah. And they somehow believe strongly enough that he's just too old or something now that he missed out.
They've just, it's just retrofitting your arguments to your beliefs. Because the thing is, Richard Dawkins could be wrong, and there are people who are, not very many it has to be said, but there are people who are senior scientists or credentialed scientists. There's a chap called P.Z. Myers, who used to run, or still does possibly run, a skeptics blog. And he describes himself as an evolutionary biologist, and I think he genuinely is. And he's totally on the, if you say there are two sexes and you say people can't change sex, you're like a flat earther and you're a Trumpite and you're an anti-Semite and all of that stuff. So, I also have talked to Richard Dawkins about this, and he is an intellectual hero of mine, and it was a genuine fangirl moment for me.
It's scary talking to him though, isn't it? Or not for you?
Oh, well, you may notice I can talk quite a lot and quite fast.
I was scared. I was frightened talking to him, and because he gives very short answers as well.
Well, he was interviewing me.
Oh.
So.
Okay, I like that. Well, and the other thing about intersex, so firstly, as you say, the statistics are just not right at all.
No.
And secondly, I am really trying. I don't see the relevance. I don't see how, some people are born intersex, therefore, if men who are not intersex believe they are women, therefore, I guess I'm trying to strongman. So the idea is it means gender's all on a spectrum because there are intersex people. That is a mad leap.
It's completely mad. But and it's also like, how could somebody be intersex? Like, I hate that word intersex. It's not a good word. It's a deprecated word now. Like, it suggests like that you are some interspecies, non-fully human type of person. If you have one of these conditions, they're serious conditions. Yeah. Like, either you've been diagnosed with it as a baby and it has shaped your early life, or there's a few that you only find out about when you hit puberty. Like, imagine you discover in puberty that you thought you were a totally ordinary female, and actually what you are is your XY, so you're male, but you lack the capacity to metabolize and use testosterone correctly, so your body turns it into estrogen, and you're going to develop along female lines, but you do not have a uterus, you do not have ovaries, you're never going to have a period, you're certainly obviously not going to get pregnant. Like, that's devastating.
Yeah.
And to call that person intersex,
Yeah.
like it's a person who has a difference or disorder of sex development. It's a serious condition.
And you're being used then by like Sam Smith and all the non-binary as part of some mad idea. And you'll be like, Lee, have you read the book Middlesex? Do you ever read that?
I haven't read it. I know the book, yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sort of take a side in these things. It is just about an intersex child who grows up, and it's fantastic.
Okay, I might look that one up then, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, why do they do it? Like, it's like the Gish Gallop, which is the, like, if I understand correctly, I mean, I never watched any of these, but Gish was like an anti-evolution debater, like a creationist, and his technique was to talk extremely fast with, plausible sounding, sometimes true, sometimes false, mostly irrelevant, facts and factoids that overwhelm any debater. And if you're trying to debate him, and even if you're able to answer all of them, like he could throw out 10 things and it's going to take you 10 minutes to debunk any one of them, and the audience can't follow. So I think they just go like intersex. And you're like, oh, God, look how long we've been talking about intersex.
Yeah.
And it's not relevant, as you say. Like, it doesn't mean that a man who has not got one of these conditions can somehow magically become a woman.
It's almost proof that they're not, that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what, I got sidetracked onto the don't call them intersex thing. But, I mean, actually, like, if there was such a thing as intersex, you would need to know what the two sexes were before you could say someone was neither of them.
Or otherwise inter would mean nothing.
Yeah, yeah. Or then they go clownfish. They love clownfish. Clownfish can change sex. They genuinely can change sex. But we're not clownfish.
Yeah. Further evidence, we're very clearly not clownfish.
Yeah,
so
and also, I mean, how do we know that clownfish can change sex? Because we know what the sexes are. Like, you couldn't say...
They change what? And then, sex, that's the thing.
I know. And I mean, the no debate thing on this area is one of the reasons they use such silly arguments, because some of them really can be debunked in one sentence, like the clownfish one. We are not clownfish. Done. And how do you know they've changed sex?
Done.
Yeah. And so if you say that to somebody who brings it up, like, the face drops because they've never heard anyone argue with it, because there's no debate.
It's like Matt Walsh when and I don't agree with a lot of Matt Walsh's politics, but when he went around going, what is a woman?
I know.
What an amazing
Did you watch
question.
that film?
Yeah, I did.
Do you remember the chicken? They do chickens cry.
Do chickens cry? No, what was that?
Her name, she's a doctor, I think it's Michelle Forcier. And she went off on this absolutely insane ramble. I can't remember why. Obviously he asked her what is a woman, but she was all kind of wishy-washy and weird about it. And then she said, do chickens cry? Anyway, she's being sued by some detransitioners. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. It comes back to haunt them. I was thinking specifically with regards to you as a mathematician, why this bothers you. And I happened to recently read... Do you ever read Ted Chiang? Ted Chiang's a short story writer, and he's fantastic.
Listen, I read nothing except factual things about sex and gender now. I've not read for pleasure for bloody years, except for J.K. Rowling, because I make an exception there. I
was doing that because of the podcast. You have to always read non-fiction because you've got to be... And then I thought, you know what? I'm done. And I'm going to go back to fiction.
I need to.
You need it's a happier life. Or maybe it's a more miserable life. Ted Chiang is great. He wrote the short story that Arrival was based on. There's a movie about language and aliens.
Oh yeah, I watched that, yeah.
Yeah, so he's always about like mathematical and science and language and how it interacts with fiction. And he wrote one called Division by Zero. And it's a short story. And it's about a woman mathematician who accidentally proves that maths or arithmetic is inconsistent. She accidentally proves that 1 does not necessarily actually equal 1. And she goes insane and tries to kill herself.
Oh, I must read this one.
Yeah. It must be up your street.
Yeah.
And I wondered if this is a similar thing. Trans women are women. When you hear that, it's almost like hearing 1 equals 2.
I mean, it's a thought-stopping cliche is the specific thing it is. And in the phrase of Robert Lifton, who wrote about thought control in China, in communist China. And he came up with this expression that a thought-stopping or a thought-terminating cliche was a short, highly reductive phrase that was the beginning and end of every conversation. Yeah. That's not quite the right wording, but anyway. So the point is that when it pops into your head, a thought, inconvenient thoughts pop into your head, like, well, if trans women are women, obviously trans women are allowed into women's sports. But, like, is that fair? Because they've been through male development. So they're going to be stronger because that's what testosterone does. And if that thought comes into your head, you need to be able to loop back and just say trans women are women, full stop. Because otherwise you'll find yourself in the very inconvenient place of realising that this is not fair.